Jeff Lawton here, and let me tell you about the integration of grazing animals, particularly cattle, into a permaculture system which is full of polycultural elements, multiple elements, and getting large animals to graze through on rotational cell grazing, like a natural herd of animals going through a prairie or savanna, tight packed by predators and moving quickly, imprinting the soil, leaving great fertility behind. I came up with a laneway system with multiple gates that give you multiple cells that can be rotated, imitating the natural grazing patterns, increasing fertility and giving you great productivity. I'm really going to enjoy explaining this to you so it can be integrated in a very, very beneficial way for your production, for your land fertility, and for the environment's enhancement. By integrating a laneway, roughly 5 to 6 meters wide, so it's got functional capability as an access way around a farm, threading through the landscape in the most stable direction on ridge lines, across valleys, over dam walls, but circuiting the landscape so that there is access to areas that are ideal for grazing cells. Gates on the laneway allow short grazing cycles of convenience, as one cell gate is opened and grazed with a temporary fence. After just 1 or 2 or 3 days, depending on season and land condition, the cattle are then naturally herded back into the laneway. They actually want to move to the next cell. They get into a habit of knowing that laneway gives them access to fresh grazing. The next cell is opened. They naturally move into the next temporary cell paddock. The next grazing area is temporarily fenced, connected to the electric laneway system. The electricity goes around the temporary paddock. The cattle graze in there with their water access. On they go through their grazing cycle, cell by cell, rotating around a property and not returning from 30 to 50 days, depending on season. With that fast grazing cycle, mineral release in the soil is increased. The cattle that are normally responsible for compaction become the decompacting element. The cattle that are normally responsible for diminishing the diversity within a pasture through overgrazing become the element that's responsible for increasing diversity in the pasture. And their health and fertility comes up. The pasture, soil and vegetation comes up in health, and the whole environment benefits from their interaction. From that beneficial effect, the landscape itself can be diversified, hangover forage can be included, graze off forage trees can be included, even trees like pecans that favor agroforestry grazing can be included within the pasture. The pasture area can be reduced, the forest can be increased without any loss in grazing production, but with an increase in grazing quality of product, whether it's beef, meat production, or whether it's dairy production. Whether it's meat or dairy, the grazing effects are enhanced by the strategies of timing the sequence of grazing cell size and the timing of grazing patterns within the system, so that any property can have grazing animals as a beneficial part of their system. The cattle laneway here is the access way for the cows, and it's overgrazed, it's well grazed because it's mainly an access way. But this is what everybody else's farm looks like. This is what overgrazed land does look like. Our cows are grazing on these mobile cells, and they're in really deep growth of long grass and high diversity of pasture. Their grazing system is now luxurious. They'll graze this tall pasture off till it's about half its height. It might be 200 millimeters, 8 inches high, and we'll move them, it's still quite long. They don't come back here for 30 to 50 days. They're actually repairing the landscape because they're imprinting, they're dropping their manures, they're grazing off, and the recovery is really diverse because it's not stressed. It's not like that overgrazed laneway and everybody else's pasture. In the overgrazed pasture where it's compacted in the laneway, there's not a lot to eat. But the comparison on either side, where we actually graze the animals, you can see the diversity, the height, the luxuriant pasture there. That's the natural way to keep the animals in really good health. They've got a really diverse pasture there, full of minerals. You're gaining the product of the landscape and the minerals of the soil. The cattle laneway here is being used by the dairy cows with the beef bull at the moment. And we have a natural partnership of insectivorous birds. Cattle egret and butcher birds are following the cattle. They're a natural predator of the insects that annoy the cattle. They get a benefit and they add extra fertility to the soil. We're getting the bird manure with the animal manure with the functions of the animals moving through the cells. They're coming back from being milked, they're coming from the dairy down to their cell here, all on their own, and the association of the wild birds is a natural occurrence as they move through their daily cycle. In amongst the diversity of the pasture, with this real mixture of different plants and the successions of plants changing. Initially this pasture had been burnt a lot by the original settlers, so there's a lot of bracken fern. Bracken fern comes after the fire and it fixes potassium. And then there are flatweeds that come to relieve the compaction, and they have deep tap roots like that, and they relieve the compaction. And these become compost corridors in the soil. And changes just keep happening towards a more positive fertility of pasture. That's what you're after. You're after a situation where everything gardens. The human interaction encourages the animals gardening ability to bring in diversity. Diversity starts to naturally occur. And here's a little plant here that naturally starts to occur in our pasture. This is sheep sorrel. Sheep sorrel is a tissue regenerative, particularly a heart regenerative. It's very beneficial to eat a few fresh sheep sorrel every day. They help your tissues repair. Now, all the way through the pasture here, there's a whole clump here of sheep sorrel. This and other herbs naturally occur. You just have to stay in observation, and the health food shop starts to appear all the way through your system. Our pasture is continuously diversified since we've been applying these strategies of timing and inclusions of different elements. And we had an event here that did concern us because we brought in 2 new dairy cows from a very high quality organic dairy. And a few weeks later, after calving, one of our cows died in the bottom paddock. One of our richest, best, most diverse paddocks at the time, recovered from overgrazing next to the river. Lots of diversity. We called in the regional vet and we were worried there was some serious problem. After an autopsy, his conclusion was that our pasture was so diverse in herbs and mixed species that this cow, coming from an organic dairy, but an irrigated ryegrass organic dairy, only growing 1 species of irrigated organic grass, that cow couldn't adjust, its rumen couldn't adjust to the wonderful diversity of herbs and species we'd already developed in our pastures, and we continue to develop. We should have brought that cow in slowly and increased its diversity so it could adjust its stomach, its rumen organisms. And the regional vet was so impressed with our pasture. His comment to us was, if everybody cycled their animals like we do, if everybody used the diversity of animals and plant species we do, his job would be many, many times easier, and the land would be a lot better. The fertility would be greater. The species diversity would be more numerous. And his job would be more organic, more natural, and better for everybody and all the things in the environment. So we took that as a testament that we're doing the right thing. We're designing interactive diversity to the benefit of all living things. Now you can see cattle can go from being potentially one of the most damaging elements on Earth to being one of the most beneficial and hard-working. It's very easy to put them to work with design of space and time sequence. It's been great showing you that, and with full explanation in a Permaculture Design certificate course, you can design it for yourself or for other people as a professional consultant designer, because that's what you end up with as a skill after taking the design certificate course.